especially the last part. I think Sai Kaoshing's work is something I understand the most because my work focuses on visual politics of contemporary art. So somehow during the course of my research focus, the thing on visual politics is something very intriguing and probably something that we can share on this panel. So now I pass the microphone to Bill.
Oh, really? Oh. Well, I guess I should thank everyone for coming today. I know it's not a convenient place, it's probably not a convenient time, so thank you for coming. And thank Narumod and everyone in Chula for organizing this. I should say that one of the things I used to do with Narumod, she used to work in Owat, Ongong Glam. And one of the things that she helped arrange, was it you who helped arrange for me? Is for me to go vote buying. So in the 1995 election, Duncan McCargo and I went to Mahasarakam, or was it Royet? I think Royet. And took part in vote buying. I guess I shouldn't say this if we're on Facebook. What's the statute of limitations? I watched other people vote buy, I didn't do it myself. So that's what I thought of when I thought about the election in February 2019, because maybe we should come back and try that again. I don't have anything to say, actually. I would just love to hear your comments, and then maybe I can respond to them. It's better for you to just kind of, you've seen the film. I'm actually curious about what you think about it. I saw some things that I want to change, but if you tell me, not just how much you might like it, but if you tell me what's wrong with it, that would be wonderful. I mean, that's the best, just get some feedback about how I can improve it, if it's possible to improve it. I mean, if you can tell me that it's horrible and I should just erase it too, that's fine.
So should all of us come up here and share what you have in mind? I think it's better since we will say we should share. So please.
Yeah, I know it's normal for academics to talk and talk, but that's not.
Well, to be honest, I myself have something to say, but probably after our colleagues share their stories. So, welcome. Maybe I'm sorry first.
Okay, thank you. I'll probably start with my Great Wall experience, then talk about walls in general, and I'll end by discussing about two walls as they appeared in the film, the Berlin Wall and the film The Great Wall by Zhang Yimou. So my Great Wall experience wasn't really great. It wasn't very manly, in fact. I think it took place in the late 90s. I was visiting my girlfriend who was studying at Pandit University at the time, and it was in December. It was snowing and freezing, and we did not last very long on the wall, and we didn't get to see much. And so it was quite a disappointing experience, and the toilet there was also disappointing. But precisely because it was too clean. It was like immaculately clean. It was like shiny, and maybe it's a new toilet or something. But it was very clean, and it deprived me of a toilet adventure to tell back home. Right? The toilet adventure is also, I think, also the title of one of Callahan's short film, right? Because people back home expect to hear stories about awful toilets in China, and of course in India, they're probably in competition or something. Yeah, and just off the cuff, I wonder what Zizek would have to say about toilets in China, because he did a very interesting ideological analysis of toilets, well, American toilets, French toilets, and the German toilets, right? And anyway, so back to the film. I think we can agree that certain walls must be torn down and destroyed. And I think we can also agree that globalization, neoliberal globalization, is about an open world for capital, but about walls and repression for workers and immigrants and refugees. And I think that globalization also thrives on the construction of walls, right? On the right, we have the so-called nationalist international, represented by Trump and Orban and all the strongmen and so on, and they're xenophobic, anti-immigrant, and the rest. But they're pretty friendly to capital and to capitalism. But we also see a kind of there's also a kind of left nationalism that tries to oppose globalization by oppose the onslaught of global capital by hiding behind walls, by shoring up national sovereignty, by refusing to engage at the international level, and mostly engaging in local, even parochial politics. So on the one side, there's a nationalist international, pretty right-wing axis of right-wing internationalism, but there's no leftist counterpart so far. I mean, do we not see a bit of this in the latest film by Peter Jackson, Mortal Engines? I know there's a predatory city called London, very imperialist campus and so on, and then there's this great Chinese city behind the wall that is full of compassion and all the rest. So it presents us with a false solution. In fact, that the only solution to predatory global capitalism is you hide behind a national sovereignty, you hide behind a solid wall. Anyways. But still, I think, as Callahan shows in the film, walls are pretty much ambiguous, right? So on the one side, walls divide and separate, inside from outside, belonging from non-belonging. And they achieve this by displacing the gaps, the antagonisms, the inconsistencies in society. They give a sense that societies are a harmonious whole, a non-contradictory being. And I seem to say that any disruption in society can only come from the outside, right? So walls are, in the form of the wall itself, maybe to a certain extent, it may be populist, because in populism, it's only before an agent that disrupts, that steals our enjoyment, that disrupts society. So walls basically, prohibit us from recognizing the fact that we are, in fact, highly divided, that even at the individual level, the difference between me and myself is as great as between me and you, and me and the rest of you. So that's on the one side, right? But on the other side, walls could create conditions for bonding, which is a paradoxical thing. In other words, this separation paradoxically enables bonding. Barriers become a source of attraction and transgression. And there's no, as if to say, there's no possibility for this bonding without the initial separation. So bonding or solidarity is not natural. It it's a political and ethical thing. And seeing this film makes me arrive at the conclusion that, when we think of universality, it's not really about greater inclusion, but a universality that is, or an equality that is based on non-belonging, right? We are equal because we don't belong, right? We are equal because, and we don't belong because everywhere it sucks, right? And we have to struggle together, and there are various struggles that we can engage together that basically cut across our differences. Okay. And another thing is that the film highlights the comic dimension of walls. Walls are pretty funny, right? And I'm stealing this observation, or I'm basing this observation from Todd McGowan's theory of comedy. So McGowan says that there's a comic situation where excess meets lack, right? So, and for instance, subjectively, every one of us we are all pretty much comic figures because we are all lacking and excessive at the same time. We are excessive because we are lacking needs, and so we go to great lengths, or even excessive length, just to fill our lack. So that there's something comic about it. And so too with walls. Walls, they are an excessive display of sovereign power to hide the fact that they don't really work, to hide the fact that they are pretty much castrated, to hide the fact that they are pretty much impotent. They're pretty much useless against global flows of capital, for instance. I think there's a kernel of truth in Frederick Jameson's observation that every state is pretty much a failed state vis-a-vis capital, right? On its own, no state is able to survive or to defend itself against global capital. But so, of course, so walls divert our attention to immigrants and to refugees instead of the objective violence of capitalism, for instance. But they're also funny because they can, not always, but they can be rearticulated or reappropriated by the people on both sides of the wall. They can turn into whatever, a bridge, an artwork, a wall for graffiti, site of resistance, and so on. Okay, then I'll move on then to walls in the film. The first one is the Berlin Wall. My supplement would simply be that back in September and October '89, the people were, of course, demanding the walls to be torn down. But, and of course, they wanted democracy. But they didn't want capitalism. And instead, they believed that it was possible to reform socialism, right? To have political democracy and socialism. And if the Berlin Wall stands for communism or totalitarianism, and that we should celebrate the fall of the wall to commemorate the victims of totalitarianism or communism, then one wonders why we don't commemorate the victims of the reunification, the victims of the violence of the transition to the market economy. So I mean, commemorating the wall itself is ideological, right? And finally, the film, The Great Wall. I just like to provide a different reading, a slightly different reading. I don't think the monsters in the film are just any external others or foreign others, but the monsters in the film, to me, they are standing for capital in general. From various dialogues in the film, you can witness that. For instance, this is from the film. The monsters, which are called the Taote, they came from outer space with a huge meteorite that struck Earth, and this is basically from the film. It was sent as a form of punishment for an emperor whose greed brought deep suffering to all of China. And then one of the lead characters says that they, the Taote, came to remind us of what happens when greed is unchecked. And another main character says that the greed of men is not different from the greed of the Taote. So greed, monster, Taote equals greed equals capital. So the idea then is that, with a strong centralized state, with military power, sovereign power, a strong centralized state, then you can basically let capital roam, because you can always rely on the Great Wall, on the strong centralized state to control it, and especially because China has a superior civilization. Because in the film, the Chinese characters are juxtaposed against the only 2-3 Western characters, especially the one played by Matt Damon, right, named William, and he was a mercenary, and he came to China to basically to steal gunpowder so that he could go back and sell it for a lot of money and so on. And so the Chinese taught him about courage, about the willingness to die for your country and to die for higher cause. And so the superior East against the decadent West, so to speak. But since China has both a strong centralized state and a superior civilization, then they are in a better position to tame, to cope with capitalism. So, but of course, in reality, this is the Chinese state is doing something totally opposite. They're not hiding behind the Great Wall, but expanding geoeconomically, into Africa and various parts of Asia, and through the one road and all, stuff you know more than I do. Anyways, okay, so these are my comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. There are many details in his comment. I think one of the things that struck me is that talk about the universality is about non-belonging. I think this like something reminds us that the wall is meant to exclude it, right? But we all experience the same thing when we got up high on the Great Wall of China, that both we can see it from the outer space, but it actually could not be seen from the outer space. I really wonder how this metaphor came out. Probably Preeda can say something related to the Chinese Great Wall and the visual experience.
Thank you so much. Actually, I don't know much about what you call visual politics, right? So, but I would like to talk in terms of communication. Well, I spent 2 years in China, Beijing, from 2002 to 2004, Beijing, and I visited Great Wall so many times, maybe more than 10 times in many places, such as Moodjalin Sudchaeron, something like that. And my Chinese teacher always told me that and I've visited so many times by cable car. Yeah. And I think I've visited Great Wall so many times, but I've never think about the message that your film describe or demonstrate. And I love this short film. When I finished this watching, I have just only a few points, and I would like to share with you in terms of in field of communication. The first is the meaning of the wall, and the second is so what should we do if we face the wall around us, something like that. Firstly, the definition, the meaning of the wall. I think when you build the wall, it's not only you spend the resources like find money or something to build it up, but it's the symbolic action. It's the symbolic action that you want to tell the other that you cannot and you don't wish to live with the other side of the wall, something like that. Because the wall is how to say, it's the border that make you alone in the world of globalization. And you think it's to believe that there's no better way to share and to live with others. I think once you build a wall, it means you don't want to connect with others. And the second point, what should we do? What should we do if we face the wall around us? I think actually the wall is not so scary thing at all, in my opinion. But what is important is we need rooms and we need some hole through the wall. If there are no rooms, people will be under pressure and maybe make chaos and crisis, and finally want to destroy or break the wall, I think. So, in present day, we see, I think human beings was the creature that want to be blocked. We see connectivity, we see to live together, and the wall will be wall when we look at the ground level or the base of the wall. But if you can reach to the top of the wall, it became bridge, like in the field that the Great Wall. There's so many people come to visit, and it's very very crowded. And at that point over there, you found the bridge and you can see panoramic view, and you can see situation clearly, and you may be able to come down cross to the other side of the wall, similar to the bubble scene. That scene, I love that scene. The bubble which go up above the wall and can cross to the other side like that. And I think we can cross to the other side of the wall when we to understand the thought, the idea, the ideology, and the feeling of the people that live in the other side of the wall. And nothing, this difference will block the communication between each other. I think in the terms of communication at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you make a nice comparison and try to highlight the experience that creating war is somehow to create a safe place for the people, and also the war is not that scary. Looking from the Great War in China's experience, and the war becomes a bridge to link people all together, and it becomes a site of gathering as well. So probably Ajahn Moodjalin can say something of this two panelists mentioned earlier.
Sorry. So thank you so much for inviting me to this wonderful talk. And I've never been to the Great Wall, though. But I heard about the story I heard about the Great Walls from my uncle and my mom who've been to China, and both of them said like it's an exciting experience walking along the walls, but it's also a happy experience for them because it's kind of like somehow connect them back to their Chinese heritage. So that's kind of interesting to me. I watched the film before I came to the talk, and I also had a chance to read one of your articles. It's the article called Politics of Walls, Barriers, Flows, the Sublime, I guess. And so my comments gonna be from, my understanding of your work will come from, the combination of reading the article and then seeing the film. So your work is really interesting to me because it invites us to kind of rethink walls as not only an instrument of controlling and polarizing, right, but also a site of discursive and effective experiences. Walls are always constantly renegotiated through political debates as well as playful and creative resistance. Walls divide us from each other, right? Divide walls separate between like two continents, two countries, two territories, but at the same time, they also bring people together, and this is quite interesting. And also create a social, a network of social relationships. Walls are not only walls, but also gates, right? As one of the president said in the film, right? As someone who has a training in anthropology, so to me this is quite interesting because this approach is kind of, instead of asking whether we should like build more walls or we should get rid of walls completely, it invites us to think about social activities, think about social relationships and ordinary everyday life of people that emerge through walls, right? I really like one scene in which like people play balls from different sides of walls, and also it reminds me of some documentary or some YouTube video that I watched lately, And in that video, immigrant families are separated by the U.S. immigration policy, so they have to come to walls to meet each other, or to talk, to chat with each other from different sides of walls, right? Or even have some physical contact with one another. So this kind of like probably relate to your point about like walls not only separate us but also bring us together, right? And also there's another case that you mentioned in the article, but maybe not the film, is that there's a case in which Trump, right? President Trump wants to build that walls, right? And he has to rely on Mexican workers, Mexican contractors to build the walls. And this is very interesting. It's kind of funny, ironic, and those Mexican workers, those Mexican contractors, as you mentioned in the article, said that we don't agree with the wall either, but we think this is an opportunity. We have jobs, right? We can make money, so we're gonna do it. And this is interesting because it kind of like shows us how somehow power plays itself out in a way that it's not just top down, right? But it critiques itself in the very act of power exercising. So that's quite interesting to me. Now I have 3 questions or 3 points that I kind of want to hear from you more. The first one is, in the film, I think at some point you said walls are ideological and personal, right? Ideological and personal, and also this talk is ideology from ideology to experience. How do you think we as researchers should bridge the gap between the study of ideology and experience? And actually, maybe want to hear more what you mean by something ideological and personal. You mean they are different in terms of scales of analysis, or different in terms of materials that we can look at, right? Or is it about discursive text versus affective experience? I don't know. Okay. Second, your approach uses walls, physical walls, as a critical intervention into the study of borders and bordering process, which is intriguing again. But what about non-physical walls or non-geographical borders, right? And by this I refer to like ethnic, racial borders, socio-cultural borders, or even language barriers, or even like the way in which people define who is insider, who is outsider, who is citizen, who is migrant, right? I'm excited to actually think about whether your approach can offer a new alternative to the studies of such borders. Like you can extend the analysis, right? And so I would like to hear your thoughts on this. My last point is that I wonder why walls? I wonder how walls might be different from, say, fences, right? Or other materials, right? They might be, of course, they're different in terms of their physicality or materiality, so probably they might involve different kind of, I don't know, discourses or effects, right? And experiences, right? So probably what I'm trying to get at is maybe want to hear more from you why you focus particularly on walls instead of other materials that used to divide between border lines. Thank you.
Thank you, Moodjalin. Okay, maybe I'd like to respond for the first 3 others.
Well, thank you all. Thank you so much. This is exactly what I hoped would happen, is you give me some great comments and some great questions. I'll start, I guess, with Achan Moodjalin. So, gosh. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, what I find interesting about walls, both in the article, so I wrote an article, actually I presented the article, Ajahn Narama arranged it, I presented it here, not in this room, but close by, 2 years ago, and it was published 6 months ago, so hooray, thank you. I use the feedback from here to publish it. And that article is very high theory, very fancy language, talks about effect and sublime. I wanted to talk about effect and sublime in my film, but the person that one of my friends is a visual anthropologist. He taught me how to make film, so I kind of go back and ask him to look at my work and see what works and what doesn't. He said, "Oh, Jesus, Bill, you can't say the sublime in a film. You just can't. Sorry." So I cut it out. I also had lots of pictures of artwork, so about resistance through art. But that just didn't, it was just too much, so I had to cut that out. So it was very interesting looking at how I wrote an essay and then I made a film, but the film and the essay are not about the same thing. They're parallel. Like the Berlin Wall is not really in the essay. It gets like a paragraph, whereas it's 1/3 of my film. And part of that is because I could get some really good film clips, some really good archive film clips from the German National Archives. I had to pay a lot of money for that 90 seconds. I have to say that was 1,500 pounds, no, 2,000 pounds for 90 seconds. Whereas the American presidential libraries are so wonderful. They give it to you either for free or for like $100 processing fee. So that's why I have lots of Berlin walls, because I could get lots of great Berlin Wall clips, as well as Richard Nixon at the wall. On to your questions. So on the one hand, this is the high theory again. I'm dealing with sort of affect theory. Affect is about feeling, and feelings not just about your own individual personal feeling, but feelings as a social, that's construct of a social connection, a social experience. That feelings, when something moves you and connects you, and there's like a prickle down your spine, sometimes the person next to you gets a prickle down their spine. Like when you sneeze, other people start sneezing too, or cough. So that's what it's about. It's about this non-cognitive, non-textual, non-narrative, blah, 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 non-representational thing. So on the one hand, ideology is not just capitalism versus communism, although it is. It's just ideology is we understand things through text. We understand the world as a text. So this is what people have been doing for the past 100 years in linguistics, in the past 30 years in social sciences. And this is what I was taught as a graduate student, how to turn everything into a text. And I've got really good at it. But in the past few years, especially after I started making films, I thought, okay, well that's one way of doing things, but there are other ways in films and visuals and sounds and smells. The other senses have a politics to them as well. And that's what I'm trying to explore in the film and in this book that I'm writing. And it's never pure. So as you see, even though I'm saying no text, no representation, my film is all about text and representations. I mean, I have to go on there and talk. I didn't want to talk in the film. The first version of the film doesn't have me talking, but it didn't work. I couldn't kind of piece together film clips to tell the story or give the feeling that I wanted. I'm just not good enough, or I couldn't find the right clip. So my friend Andy, the visual anthropologist, said, "Bill, just get in there." And what he did, you might find this, you might like it or dislike it, people have different views. He said, "Bill, I really like your voice. Your voice sounds great." It's this English guy likes American accents. And he said, because at first I said, "I don't want to be in the film." And he says, "No, more Bill. We want more Bill. Be in there at the beginning, the middle, the end. You've got to be there." So where at first it was just this wonderful montage of effective clips, which I thought were great, but nobody else thought were great. After I went, Andy looked at this film 5 times. These are 5 different main cuts. And he said, each time, more Bill, less other people, more Bill. And so that's why I don't know whether there's too much Bill or not enough Bill. But I guess my point is that even though I'm saying let's question ideology, let's question narrativity, I'm still doing it, and I'm aware of that. And I don't think it's hypocritical. I think it's just this contradiction of how do we communicate? We can communicate in different ways. So what I'm doing is raising questions more than providing answers. So I don't think your question is, how should we bridge the gap between ideology and experience? That's not really, that's an interesting question. That's perhaps not the one I'm doing. I'll have to think about whether I want to do that or not. But so that's why I kept in, so the volleyball scene, it's actually called Wallyball, volleyball at the wall. This is at the US-Mexico barrier at San Diego, where the wall goes into the sea. And the wall has gone into the sea there for about 30 years. So the US-Mexico barrier is not a complete wall. This is what Trump wants to do. He wants to build a complete wall from San Diego to Texas. There's fences there, as you said, there's fences, there's walls, it's not complete. But the place at the US-Mexico border in San Diego is, to me, that's where I go. So I have friends in San Diego, and it's a 10-minute drive from downtown San Diego to the border. And the place that I think one of you was saying that you can go there, maybe it was you can go there and talk to people through the wall. It's that place. It's called International Friendship Park. And when I was there 2.5 years ago, you could touch your pinky through the wall. The grid, it's very Foucauldian, the grid keeps getting smaller for, you can understand reasons, because people were smuggling things. So you're passing a message, other people might be passing drugs. So they have it so small that you can just put your pinky through. And so that's what it's become. That's how you again, it's a sort of affective experience. If you touch people literally by putting your pinky through, and that's the symbol there. And similarly, my wife was in the film. She's the talent in the film. She's the one who tells her sister secrets of going to the bathroom at the Great Wall. Naughty simile. She went to me with wall, and it really is an effective experience. It's the sublime in the sense of something really great but horrible at the same time. Because it's really great that these people can come together and see each other. And we were there 2.5 years ago. Every family has a story. Some of them hadn't seen their relatives for years. Some of them go because it's open every weekend, and it's a free space so that even if you're an undocumented migrant, you can go there and you won't be arrested. So that's part of it. It's this kind of free space, but there's still this huge wall there. So I guess to me it embodies a sort of contradictory or multi-level or whatever hybrid condition at the wall. That the wall is separating but bringing people together. But bringing people together in specific ways. About non-geographical borders, sure. I think there's actually a lot of work done on non-geographical borders. Most of the work done in critical geography, which is the sort of subfield that deals with this, has moved from talking about borders at the border between countries to how borders are everywhere. So in Thailand and in the U.S., in Thailand, every province that's along the border is under martial law, and has been for decades, because it's seen as the regular rules don't apply. And of course, in a country the shape of Thailand, almost every province is along the border. There are very few provinces that aren't along the border. It's similar in the U.S. If you're within 100 miles of the border, then you have to show identification. You can be pulled over by Border Patrol or whoever, even if you're 100 miles in. So that's what people have been talking about for the past 10 years, is how borders are everywhere, in airports, in the middle of cities. So there's a lot, and we can talk about that. I guess what I'm trying to do in this film and in my book is think about the sort of inside-outside relations, because that's been the way people have talked about critical international relations for the past, how many years? 25 years or so. And self-other relations, inside-outside self-other relations. I found that the sort of the purpose of talking about inside-outside and self-other relations is not to say, oh, this is inside and that's outside, you're the self, I'm the other. To say, no, this is not the way to do things. It's a problem when you turn different or otherness into difference, or difference into otherness. So I'm kind of trying to move beyond this sort of self-other, even though it's criticizing these binaries, these dichotomies of inside and outside, self and other. I find that it often reasserts them, perhaps knowingly, perhaps unknowingly. So what I'm looking at now is order, social ordering and world ordering, since I do international relations. So it's the kind of the ordering, the social ordering, the world ordering that takes place at the Great Wall, or at the U.S.-Mexico area, or at the Berlin Wall. And it's, as I guess you were saying, it's a social process. It's not this political or technical or scientific distinction. It's about social relations and how they work. Yeah, so I'm just looking at how walls do things and how walls make things, how they have a certain agency. There's a pretty good literature now on how it's not just human beings who do things, but that in strange ways, objects and things have think power, as Jane Bennett calls it. So that's what I'm looking at. The last question, why walls, why not fences? I'm using walls as a broad category to include fences. So you're right, people can criticize me about, well, walls, you should talk about fences in a different way, and you're right, but I only had 11,000 words, so I chose to use them in that way. But yeah, it's all about the physicality and materiality. Let's see. Moodjalin Callahan. Yeah, I guess the same sort of thing. What is the meaning of the wall? That's, in some ways, that's what I'm trying to look at. I've been trying to write an article about the Great Wall of China for 15 years. I finally did it 2 years ago, and it didn't turn out the way I expected. I was expecting to say, oh, the Berlin Wall is bad, so we should see the Great Wall is bad too. And I sort of say that in my paper. It separates civilization and barbarism. And then even in the Zhang Yimou film, the Great Wall, I see that as a sort of Chinese civilizationalism, kind of self-other relations. You Westerners are barbarians. Because the Matt Damon character says, oh, you're right, I do smell. So it's like, wow, they're setting up the hierarchy of China is better. But then I found, looking into it, that it's actually, of course, not that simple, and that I tried to look beyond looking at walls as either good or evil. Because that's, in my paper especially, I found that the very fancy theorist, critical discourse on walls is actually quite thin and quite simple and not very satisfying. It's like, divisions are bad. It's like, no, people make divisions all the time. It's about where you make it and how you make it and who's included, who's excluded. It's not like walls are bad. It's like, why this wall here? Why not there? What does the wall do? But as I said just a moment ago, I've been trying to look beyond looking for the meaning of the wall. The meaning and ideology I see is kind of interlinked that way, to look at what walls, not what they mean, but what they do, how they make us do things, how how they affect us in particular ways, which is it's kind of a much harder argument to make. Yeah, so your second question, what to do with walls? That's what I'm really interested in. Not just what to do with walls, but what do walls do to you? And so that's why I'm fascinated. You go to the Great Wall, everyone goes there and has a great time, except when you don't. You know, so so I've interviewed about 100 people about their experience going to the Great Wall, the same sort of things that you said. Each of you said, you know, I went to the Great Wall and you didn't go to the Great Wall. And the experience is either I loved it or I was disappointed. I loved it because it showed some great sublime experience. I was disappointed because it was crowded, it was hot, the bathrooms were either bad or they were too clean or something. You know, disappointment. Yeah, I'm very interested to hear. You have to, hopefully you can tell me where Zizek talks about toilets.
He hasn't mentioned anything like Chinese toilets.
Right. No, but other toilets. Because it's one of these things that if you start looking, you see that lots of people look at toilets as a thing, you know, a comparative thing. It tells you something about national character.
I think there's a short clip on YouTube.
Right.
You know, Zizek from Fort.
Okay. Why am I not surprised? Yeah, I mean, I'm persuaded by your analysis of walls and capitalism, and it's interesting. I was wondering too about in the Zhang Yimou film the story behind these evil monsters and where they come from. And yeah, I think it's interesting that you're seeing greed as capitalism. And in Chinese context, that makes sense. I mean, from the way someone like Zhang Yimou would tell the story. But I guess at the same time, as you've heard, I'm trying to move beyond looking at things in ideology and look at the experience. So that's why, to me, it's less important to see what sort of the transcript of the film, how they're explaining these evil monsters. And it's more interesting to me to see, oh my God, they come and they eat a woman alive. They just rip her to shreds. So that's, to me, that's what's interesting to me, is the brutality of it and how they, if I remember right, they're even green-blooded. They don't even have red blood. I guess that's because of their outer space. So that's what I'm trying to do, is kind of push beyond ideology. But I guess I haven't convinced you. It's fine. I guess the last thing you mentioned was how China is expanding. I guess you didn't say expanding beyond expanding the Great Wall, but I think they are in a sense expanding the Great Wall through the Belt and Road Initiative, because a lot of there's the cyber Silk Road, or the cyber part of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is expanding the Great Firewall in China to other countries that are selling it, as well as subsidizing it. And that's quite interesting. I didn't think of that. So thank you. It's, yeah. I think it was, yeah, I'll stop there. We'll get some more feedback.
Well, thank you, for your answers and response. I'm wondering if I may, because then you asked me to share what I'm thinking. I was studying because I think it's very intriguing story you made up in the film. You fabricated things together, and I think there are two ways of thinking of the wall. The one is visuality, visibility versus invisibility. The wall and border, whereas the border is more fluid and is a demarcation of the nation, but the wall somehow couldn't exclude people, even though it has a tangible structure, right? But the border somehow can exclude people, and the wall is meant to obstruct people from getting in or going out, but at the same time, it's a defending machine, it's a military structure to exclude and to I think for the Great Wall, it's also meant to make a stunning effect to the observer. This is gigantic, this is extravagant. I think that there must be something out of that. But also thinking how the contemporary world is fashioning the wall, right? I just watched a film, Mortal Engine. It's about the steampunk world, imagination world. If the city can move and consume the other city, and you not only consume, you destroy, you literally destroy and extract all the power, all the people embrace it into your city, and it's become attraction city. So the attraction city of London approached a Great Wall and tried to destroy that Great Wall, and literally you can see people in the yellow, the color behind the wall, whereas London is a city of white people, right? And also you think how the technology of the film is based on the coal mine, the coal field, right? So that theme also brought me to the question that the war is, on the one hand, for your theme, is made to exclude non-white people, right? Even now we have seen the Honduras people are coming to the state, and Trump is getting more furious on this cause. And also we think of the other side of the world, for example, at the border between India and Pakistan, at the Wagah-Atari border, that wall, that fence, or the border becomes a theme park. People waiting keenly and curiously waiting for the moment that the troop will parade, right? And step their feet into the other side of the nation, right? The Nepalese soldier tried to step as high as he could, and the Indian troop as well tried to show up at the border, and the crowd get together and cheer up, try to say that this is our pride of the nation at the border, at the gate of the nation, right? It become a theme park. But whereas at the Panmunjom, the JSA joint security area between the North and the South Korea, that border is tense, right? You cannot even trim the tree that came out of the North Korea. Because there was a story that an American soldier was killed by a North Korean soldier because he trimmed a tree that came out of the North Korean side, and it's like violation of the sovereignty of North Korea. So it's totally different between city to city, brother to brothers. We have a tangible wall on the one hand, but we have invisible wall as well. So the theme brought me to the very first experience of the visual politics, the ways of seeing by John Berger. Your theme somehow, I think if possible, you probably can make it elaborated into the very introduction to the visual politics of war, of exclusion and inclusion. I think this is a very important aspect of the work we made. And of course, we have come to the idea that even though we try so hard to make a wall to exclude people, to defend ourselves literally, but at the same time, the wall cannot exclude people from getting in and out. The wall is just something symbolizing the wall in our mind, right? Thinking of how Donald Trump tried to convince the American that making wall is the best way to defend the country and to improve the quality of life of the US people. I think that is really, very outstanding aspect on making wall. Thank you, that's all mine.
I remember what I was going to say. The idea that you can see the Great Wall from outer space comes from the American magazine Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Oh.
So it was never true.
That said something.
But in China, it became sort of a source of pride that the government sort of believed it. So when they sent their first, China sent its first astronaut, or they call it taikonaut, into space in, I think, 2003, someone asked him, "Oh, could you see the Great Wall?" He said, "No, you can't see it." But he kind of paused. It's like, do I really want to be the guy who says you can't? But he told the truth. But it was a big deal. They had to change textbooks, and because they'd rather be a scientific power than be some sort of the historical Great Wall power.
Okay. What about our panelists? You have anything to say? Anything to share after all? Okay, so maybe it's time to open question and response from the floor. Please feel free to share your idea. Question? Critique? Yes, please. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Yanting Huang from Taiwan. Some of the sharing based on my history, based on my knowledge received from so-called traditional Chinese history education. I think I like the film and like the way you're trying to talk about these different walls existing and will be existing in different periods in the time. But I think the function and the meaning of the wall we should, if we're going to discuss this, we should look into the context when the context when people build it. I think I think everyone has noticed that the people the opinion of Berlin people to Berlin Wall and the feeling of Chinese people toward Chinese Great Wall is totally different, and it's because they don't. You said the film, according to the introduction of this event, you said that you wanted to look into the how the wall functioned and how it influenced the everyday life of people. But I think most of the people in China, they don't have so-called everyday life experience to the Great Wall. They only have traveling experience and perhaps once in their life. So to Chinese, especially Chinese nowadays, I think the Great Wall is like the pyramids in Egypt. Like, it is this kind of thing. It doesn't function like the wall in Berlin during the Cold War. And although Donald Trump he dragged this idea and to justify that he would like to build a wall between U.S. and Mexico. I think it is totally not, how to say, not a really, not the concept that can go together really well. And to Chinese, I think the Great Wall, you know, if we talk about Berlin Wall and U.S.-Mexico War, there will be those function as a borderline. They separate inside and outside, you and us, those people and us, right? But Chinese Wall, and although I won't say that, but we know the so-called Chinese history, 5,000 years. It's a really long time, and during every dynasty, every period, they have different context, which is different from China nowadays. And the meaning of the sentence you kept talking about, 不到长城非好汉, you won't be a great man unless you go to the Great Wall. It didn't exist in China for such a long time during the long history. This sentence was written by Chairman Mao. It hadn't existed until 1950s. So this is all the meaning of Great Wall have changed in China, in the mind of Chinese, because of the nation building program, nation building movement of Chinese Communist Party. And the people, the tribe people, they tried to resist when that emperor made people build the wall. Now are all Chinese. So in China, they won't. Can you imagine that if they say to the people, say to the minority, ethnic minorities, and say, oh, we built this wall because before we wanted to make your ancestors be out of our country. They won't say that. So the meaning of Great Wall have already changed, and that's why we can see that it doesn't function like Berlin Wall and the maybe will be built U.S.-Mexico Wall. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I agree with her that you cannot compare the Great Wall with the Berlin Wall. I have a chance to see both walls. I've been to the Great Wall in 1992 when it was very filthy. I have one question. I expect that we would discuss more about Trump Wall. Maybe I misunderstand. Because I think Trump Wall is very important right now. And if we talk about Trump Wall, I hope that we will compare it to the Israel Wall. Because Trump did say something about Israel Wall. He said the Israel Wall is 99.99% workable. And look at the shape and the size of the wall. I think Trump gets some idea from the Israel Wall. So I'm not sure if it's appropriate or not to talk about the Israel Wall. Thank you.
Any comment or question? Thank you, Evie, for the issue on the Trump's wall. I think on theme there was the Pope said that it's not the idea of a good Christian to build a wall. So probably you can elaborate more on that, please.
I want to know if we're getting any likes on Facebook.
Any like? We have 2 people watching.
There is one viewer. Very good one, very successful.
So the comment is that I'm not understanding Chinese history and the Great Wall as Chinese people do and how Chinese people experience it. And that it's not, you're not convinced by my comparison of the Berlin Wall and the Great Wall. And I need to have more of Trump's Wall and the Israeli Wall. Actually, I have a lot of Trump's Wall and the Israeli Wall in my paper. And I had them in earlier versions of this film, but I'll blame my friend Andy because he said, Bill, there's too much. This is not an essay. You need to boil it down. You have to decide what is most important. And what I decided most important is what I put in my title, subtitle. It's about the relation between ideology and experience. So, in a sense, I can understand your disappointment because you want to have some information, some discussion, some critique of these various walls that are current events. But I decided that there's actually a lot of people talking about Trump's wall. I haven't found anybody in academia who supports Trump's wall. Okay, not in my bubble. So I thought, okay, if that's done, I agree. Don't like Trump's wall. I'm going to do something else. There's a space here to talk about walls in a different way. And what I guess I'm trying to do is do what some people call comparative political theory, where we don't just take European concepts like democracy or self-other or whatever, and then go to Asia and apply them as, where Thailand and China are case studies. But we try to, in comparative political theory, try to use concepts from all over the place. So it's not just the West is modern and China is traditional. So now when people go to China for alternative IR theory, they always go to ancient China, harmony, Tianxiao, and all under heaven. They don't talk about the concepts from China that have been used more recently. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I understand your comments completely, but I'm trying to do something a little different, and put these things alongside each other, because in a lot of ways I agree. The Berlin Wall and the Great Wall are really different. They come from different contexts. But what is interesting to me is that they both are tourist sites now. So the Berlin Wall is a tourist site. They have a Berlin Wall museum. They've turned various sections of the Berlin Wall, some of which I filmed in the film. I overexposed them, so maybe you can remember, into this place where you go and experience the Berlin Wall. Of course, you're not experiencing it because nobody's going to shoot you. That's what was happening before 1989. But you can see the wall, you can see where it was, you can see how it divided society. The other kind of criticism of my juxtaposition of the Berlin Wall and the Great Wall of China is that we don't like the Berlin Wall because it divided an organic society. Berlin was whole and the wall divided it. Germany was sort of whole and the wall divided it. The Iron Curtain divided Europe. Whereas the Great Wall of China was supposed to be sort of the northern sovereign boundary of China. But of course, if you look at the history of the Great Wall, it's been in different places at different times. And it wasn't just to defend, it was actually a military maneuver. Kind of the armies, the land armies would go out and invade territories, and they'd build a wall to maintain it. So it wasn't just a defensive wall, which is the main story we hear from the PRC these days. But it was an offensive wall. But I guess the thing that fascinates me about the Great Wall of China, and that's why I've been trying to write something about it for years, is that to me symbolism is the symbolism of the Great Wall is very familiar. It's about defending civilization from barbarians, whether the barbarians are capitalist, the barbarians are socialist, the barbarians are Manchus or Mongolians. It's still about separating it. So when you ask, oh, no one would ever say that this wall was built to exclude, you said we're all Chinese now, but that's just not true. You know, there's huge tensions in China between Han Chinese, the 93% majority, and the 7% national minorities. Huge tensions. I mean, they have 1 million people in concentration camps right now. So you can't say that everybody agrees they're Chinese. And so a couple of my friends are Uyghurs from northwest China, from Xinjiang, and they're among the 100 people that I interviewed, and I got some great clips from them talking about the Great Wall. One of them said, I'm not interested in the Great Wall. She wants to go to Beijing because Beijing is sort of a modern city, but she doesn't go to the Palace Museum. She doesn't care about that. She certainly doesn't care about the Great Wall. She says, she's not interested, okay? So I said, why? She's just not interested. So she's a friend, an old friend, so I was playful. I said, are you not interested because they built the wall to keep people like you out? And she just said, she still didn't answer, but it's true. The wall is built to keep people like her out. So your sort of criticism or critique comment that things have changed and that everybody's Chinese now, I guess I would disagree. I think that's what really interests me about the wall. So maybe,
I think if you want to say that, then why didn't these people appear in the film? Because in the film we see the Han people, the Han Chinese, defending how great the Great Wall is.
yeah.
But if you want to say that, I think it will be really good if we see some ethnic minorities speaking their opinion toward Great Wall in the film, not the complimentary toward Great Wall, like from the perspective of Han Chinese.
Oh, the simple reason is because they would get in trouble, their families would get in trouble, their families, I mean, I'm not exaggerating, their families, something like this happens, I'm not saying my film is important, but something like this happens, people get thrown in the concentration camps. So I decided it's not worth it. It's not worth it for my friends. It's actually not, I would get in trouble too. The biggest trouble I get in, well actually no, I might be kidnapped like the Canadians. But this is, thank you for raising this, because it shows how it's actually quite difficult to make films about China now. That when I went, so I have some clips in there at the Great Wall, at the main Moodjalin place. I did it in 3 years ago in 2015. It was actually illegal. That's illegal film. I guess I shouldn't say this on Facebook. No. Because a couple of years before, they passed a law saying that you need to have a special visa if you are making a film. Now I'm a filmmaker, but I don't have a crew. It's just me and my camera. But when I went on the wall, I overheard two of the guards on the wall, security guards, saying, "Oh, look at that guy. He has a big camera. Is he a journalist? Should we ask him for his ID and his credentials? Make sure it's legal." And I just kind of walked away. They probably figured I don't understand Chinese, so I just sort of wandered away and just got out of there. And they were too lazy to follow me, so it was great. But they could have challenged me, and I could have been in big trouble. So this is the sort of thing when I show films, especially in Europe, they don't understand how difficult it is to make these films. Whereas I can go to the U.S.-Mexico border and film people doing whatever, and I'm not going to get in any trouble. Well, somebody shaking your head.
You forbidden to film in the
permitted to film, not for security reasons, but for privacy reasons, which I think is fine. And I still did film. That's actually the film at the border is also against the rules. There's a lot of things in this film that are against the rules. If you like the Tecate beer commercial, the 30-second commercial where they, it turns out I can't show that. So this will not be in a later version of the film because Tecate beer, which is owned by Heineken beer, will not let they told me that they will not let anybody use anything because they want to have complete control of their brand. What I should have done is ask them for money because it went to the person in the product placement department of Heineken. So product placement is like you have a Hollywood movie and they show a Toyota car. Toyota Motor Company paid the money to put that Toyota car in the film. So that's what I should have said. Rather than asking permission, I should have said, can you pay me £1,000 to put your commercial? Anyway, so later versions will not have Tecate beer, sadly. So to answer your question, yeah, it would be nice to have national minorities in there saying that they're excluded by the wall, but I don't want to do that because they'll get in trouble. And I don't think I'm exaggerating to make myself sound important. Also, the two main people the two main Han Chinese who are saying about the wall, they're being incredibly sarcastic about it, especially Andy Lee, my poor PhD student who I exploit. He's one who says, I've been to the wall too many times. Although I have to say, the pictures of him with his parents, him when he's like this big, he's so cute. Anyways, just one last thing. I think what I'm doing here is, I'm actually, in a way, I'm not surprised that people are disagreeing with my comparing the Great Wall and the Berlin Wall. But that's what I want to do. I want to compare things that are strange. I want to juxtapose things that don't normally go together and to see what happens. Now I have to see whether anything interesting happens or not. Just by putting two strange things together doesn't mean that it's good analysis. But that's what I want to do, to see what the Great Wall can tell us about the Berlin Wall and Trump's Wall, and what Trump's Wall can tell us about the Great Wall.
Question?
Please.
It's probably a really obvious question, but it was mentioned a little bit about the Belt and Road Initiative.
Sorry, what?
The Belt and Road Initiative.
Right.
And I'm more into rivers than walls, and I can imagine another film like Great Rivers, journeys from ideology to experience and back again. If I sort of, I'm not a visual IR person. My impression from the film is that especially, so people come together around the Great Wall, and in particular you have Nixon and Reagan. And I guess the idea that we should get is that the wall brought together very different ideologies at that time and kind of became a force for coming together. Moving forward to the present time, like the Cold War is over, ideologies have changed and almost switched around in some way. And I'm trying to sort of think, so I focus a lot on the Lancang-Mekong Cooperation, which is kind of the subset of the Belt and Road Initiative, and after other people in this room. And I'm trying to sort of think of examples of how the Great Wall has kind of figured in trying to bring the region together. And I can't actually think of any. But instead, there's other sort of ideas like the naturalization of China plus mainland Southeast Asia coming together around the Lancang-Mekong River. And so trying to find so when I think about the Belt and Road Initiative, it's more about connection. So I'm wondering if there's some symbolism in there that you might connect with the Great Wall. And when I think about rivers, maybe this is more along the lines of work that I've been doing, I think China is the at the headwater of maybe 40 transnational rivers in total. And like in the like from the 1960s and especially in the 1990s when an international agreement was made around sharing rivers, China voted against this UN Watercourses Convention because it felt it gave too much privilege to downstream countries. But now more recently, China's kind of starting to rethink about its position because now many of the rivers have become like a fait accompli with dams built at the top. And so instead of wanting to separate the upstream from the downstream, rivers may become the possibility of like linking the region together. So I'm wondering if there's some, so although it's not really great walls, but instead great rivers finding linkages in a different sense. But it doesn't mean like the sort of cultural experience or the effect of trying to create this feeling of togetherness is not trying to be built upon. So in some of the presentations that I've joined, where there's been representation from China talking about why there should be a coming together of the Lanchang-Mekong cooperation, it tries to build these new cultural affiliations and a feeling of effect towards each other. I think the main example has been, they often talk about the cultural symbolism of the film Lost in Thailand and why the countries should come together around that. So I'm wondering if there's something you can comment about what the film talks to about the contemporary sense of the Belt and Road. Thanks.
Yeah, rivers are, I guess, fascinating. You know about them more than I do, but it's the same sort of thing, that rivers divide countries in terms of borders, but in terms of ecosystems, they kind of bring them together. So you have a river valley rather than a river as a border between Thailand and Laos, for example. And yeah, I think there's a lot of scope there for a film. I would definitely encourage you to make that. In China, it's in my article, and it's one of the other things that I cut out of the film, because I have some great pictures of how Beijing Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Beijing sees the Great Wall as a model of foreign relations, of peaceful, defensive foreign relations, and how for the past 30 or 40 years, various foreign ministers have said, quite literally, that the Great Wall's peace means that we don't invade, we just defend, that we're the victim, you're the aggressor. And as I mentioned before, that's actually not how the Great Wall worked in history. Sometimes it's defensive, sometimes it's actually offensive, tool of conquest. What I found most interesting is a picture in Pakistan where the Chinese ambassador is at the headquarters of the Foreign Ministry of Pakistan giving a silk tapestry bigger than that screen, twice as large as that screen, to the Pakistani nation as a sign of friendship. And to me, I'm like, what the heck? How is a wall a sign of friendship? If we just sort of see a wall as division, why would you want to give that as a sign? I mean, there's lots of, you could give a pandas or something as a sign of friendship. But it just shows that, at least within Beijing, this sort of notion of the Great Wall as peace, as friendship, as bringing people together is huge. And of course, I forgot, the main example of this is the Great Wall tapestry in the United Nations headquarters in New York, which is as large as this whole room. It's huge. I mean, I'm not joking. It's almost as large as this whole room. And I can't get a picture of it because it's in the part of the UN that's not open to visitors. So I have to get one of my diplomatic friends to go there and photograph it for me. And I guess the last thing I want to say is this: one of my colleagues who wrote a book about the Great Wall, he mentioned that when the Republic of China held the UN seat, that Taiwan held the UN seat, their artistic contribution to the United Nations was another tapestry of a passage from ancient Chinese philosophy about great harmony. And the Great Harmony passage says that we don't have walls. There are no walls. We leave the gates unlocked. So this Arthur Waldron said, isn't this fascinating? In 1975, the Chinese government took down that Great Harmony, cosmopolitan, everybody's equal thing, and then said, no, let's have a wall. Anyway. Yeah, so I guess this is why I get excited about the Great Wall, because it has not just lots of different meanings. People use it, the Chinese state uses it in different ways, and people use it in different ways. If you go to a Chinese border, as you're about to kind of show your passport, they have a sign with the Great Wall. So that's the sort of borders are everywhere idea. And it has a cartoon of a very nice Border Patrol policeman looking cute and helpful. But behind him is the Great Wall.
I have a question, Frank, MAIDS program. So I really like Nixon's visit to the wall. Do you think that's an experience, or is that ideology that he's talking about when he says, just coming here and seeing this great wall, you just have to assume that it would take great people to build this, and 2,000 years ago, China was a great dynasty, and many great dynasties. It almost seems like it's a journey from ideology to ideology, where the experiences that you're telling are just kind of building up this belief that China is this great power, and they've always been a great power, and they're going to become a great power again, and that's what they're doing. That's kind of how I interpreted it. And then the experiences that you tell from the recent times with your students, they're quite sarcastic about it. I'm interested in what's the experience of a Chinese person who's just had their income expand so where they can travel a little bit, and this is their first time coming to the Great Wall and seeing it in person when they've been taught it in the textbooks. Would you ever consider putting that into the film?
Sure, but as I said, it's hard to go in film now. I should have done that in 2015. I saw a pair of, when I was there in 2015, I just kicked myself that I didn't interview them or just say hello. There was a pair of old women. I mean, they might have been my age. They might have been in their mid-50s, but they looked really old. So they're peasant women, as you say. They newly prosperous, or their son or their grandchildren had decided to take them to the Great Wall, and they were sort of bewildered by the whole experience. You can see they were confused. I'm sure they were happy to be there, but it was just so outside of their experience of living in the village, tending crops. To be there at this Great Wall was a sense of awe. I think somebody mentioned that. That's what it is. It's about awe. You go to the Great Wall. It was built to inspire awe, and it worked for these two women. Yeah, you're right. If I were more professional, I would go back and film again. But this is where I show that I'm not professional. It costs money. I know. and time. Your question about Nixon, maybe I can ask everyone one of the things I've been wondering is whether I should have long clips of these archive films of Kennedy at the Berlin Wall, of Reagan at the Berlin Wall, of Nixon at the Great Wall. I think they're great, but maybe it's just me. I just love seeing everything going on. Because these are clips that I had heard about Kennedy say when I'm Berliner, but I had never seen it. Certainly had never heard it. So it was fascinating to go to the Kennedy Library and get the clip. I didn't go there, they sent it to me. And so the reason why I have the long clips, because I can shorten them to maybe 15 or 30 seconds each just to give their punchline. But I decided, especially with Nixon, to have a longer clip of him climbing up, him being there, looking around, not just him talking, but him just sort of chatting with people. And then at the end, having him come down and then go into this fade out. To me, that's the experience, not just him talking, but him looking, and then seeing the cameramen, kind of what they decide is important, how they chose to sort of edit the film. So I re-edited all these films. These aren't the same films that you get when you go to the presidential library, but they're not that strong. They're not that different. So some of the sort of jump cuts and the sort of change of exposure, that's just some film, cameraman doing it because he had to. Anyway, I'm babbling about filmmaking things. So yeah, I'm just curious. I'd like to hear from everyone whether they like the longer clips or whether they just want to go to the meat, go to the ideology.
Hi, Charlie Tainman. I teach international relations at Canada. Excuse me if I start shivering. I'm about to freeze to death over here. Just wanted to make some comments about the film and sort of just in general comments that may or may not be useful. But I thought the introduction and the kind of clips of Trump talking about his role were really, really interesting, and then to kind of follow that with the juxtaposition of kind of Kennedy and Reagan kind of talking at the Berlin Wall, basically kind of showing this completely different understanding about the role of the walls dividing East and West Berlin, and the role of the wall dividing kind of the US and Mexico. And I thought that was really interesting. And there was, it seemed to me like there was this kind of potential tangent that you could have kind of followed through the film in terms of, on the one hand, kind of showing Trump's claims about how building this wonderful, superb wall with Caterpillar tractors and not Komatsu tractors is going to protect the American people from these low-wage workers who then kind of steal all of their jobs and provide this sense of kind of sort of security in a kind of post-financial crisis America, and then kind of having that understanding about what the function of the wall is, contrasted with the attempts of the Democrat kind of president of Kennedy and the kind of Republican president of Reagan, saying Gorbachev can tear down this wall. There's something really interesting there. But then I guess I was a bit kind of perplexed with the direction of the kind of the narrative, or perhaps more kind of meaningfully the absence of a narrative when it comes to the discussion of the Great Wall. And I think in the discussion after the film, some of these issues or some of these themes about political ordering, about world ordering, about this kind of theatrical projection of sovereign power to protect some or to assert these kind of differences as otherness as a way of kind of performing the self by kind of othering something else. There's some really, really interesting stuff there that I think that if you were to be a little bit clearer about, say, the politics of the walls in each case, in the case of the US-Mexico Wall, in the case of the Berlin Wall, in terms of the Great Wall, what is the ideology behind these walls? What was the kind of dominant interpretation of what these walls are supposed to mean, according to Trump, or according to Kennedy, according to Reagan, according to whomever in the Chinese case, which you can then, I guess, subvert or kind of reveal the hypocrisy of, or the kind of instability of that meaning by looking at people's experiences. And I guess that's the lack I see in the film, is the kind of politics of each wall, and how they relate to one another with the different specific contextual meanings. That would be really interesting to draw out a little bit more, I think.
Okay, thank you. my biggest sort of excitement was actually finding that very short clip of Pat Nixon in 1971 going to the San Diego, the place that I keep going back to, the San Diego Tijuana border, and demilitarizing it. Okay, so it doesn't show up in the film, but it used that whole area of the beach used to be controlled by the Navy and was used for practice, for exercises. And then in the 1970s, a lot of these military bases and properties were given by the federal government to state governments on the condition that they open them to the public as state parks. So that's what she's doing. She's actually handing the deed to the Secretary of State of the state of California. And as far as I know, no one has seen that film. I had to pay extra to get it digitized. So it had been sitting in sort of cellulite form in the Nixon Presidential Library. I don't think anybody went to look at it because nobody cares about these sorts of things. But I saw it online, through the catalog online, and I got them to digitize it. And to me, it's just fascinating to compare it, not just, because that's the sort of link between the Great Wall and Trump's wall is the Nixons, because Pat Nixon and Richard Nixon are at the Great Wall in 1972, and if you listen to Nixon, he's really not quite sure what to say about the Great Wall. It's a great wall, great people, but then at the end he says, well, let's get rid of walls that divide us, ideological walls. He doesn't say cultural walls. It shows that this sort of identity politics that we take for granted today was not the way people talked about things in 72. It was ideology. China was a communist place, not a Confucian place. Anyway, and Pat Nixon, who's there right next to him in a bright red jacket and hat, she a year earlier is at the border, the U.S.-Mexican border, and anyway, I found that fascinating. Maybe I need to. The problem was that she speaks really quickly, and it was hard to kind of edit that in. And by the time she says everything, I have to find a way to sort of take a breath. Maybe I just need to put in some picture there or something, because getting to editing things. Because that, to me, that is a key turning point in the film, and it gets lost, I think, unless you have watched the film 100 times like I have. And I guess what is also interesting about that short clip, which I had to put together, that's where I really had to construct it, because it's actually two films, one of her speech and one of her going around, and I had to edit them together. To me, what was interesting about that is, on the one hand, she's just friendly, and she's founding International Friendship Park, which is still there, even though there's a big wall, 30-foot wall, dividing it. And she's so friendly to her friends. She doesn't say Mexico, and she doesn't say the U.S. She says California and Tijuana. So that was quite curious as well. So it's not national identity, it's not racial identity even. It's kind of this local, neighboring communities. And what was most interesting to me about it is that Pat Nixon goes out of her way to talk about experience, about this is a place where people will come and have fun now. The military's gone, you can come and have fun. And I'm going to surf too, which is just crazy. And just think that you usually think of the Nixons as these very conservative, funny-duggy people, at least I do. To have Pat Nixon say, well, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try surfing. And to see her chatting with these hippie-like surfer dudes with long hair and shaggy beards. Anyway, that's what I think is the experiential part of it. Maybe it's not. Is that what Yeah, you're right. I need to be clear about what I'm trying to say in the film. So thank you. I'll take your comments.
One more question.
I'm sorry, maybe it's not a question, it's just some sharing thought of mine after seeing the films, some of the films. So I really like this clip that you cut it out from the McKinney's speech about Berlin Wall. So she had, she said that if the social society firm enough, we can bring down the wall. So it struck me that the ideas of how intangible that the wall can be. So it's also in relation to the boundary of migrations and to what extent that the wall and the borders become the symbols of the political ideas, but people like the normal people doesn't care about. Like for example, I would think about boundary migrations. So in our country, I'm from Vietnam, so the ethnic minority that they live near the borders, they just easily cross the large Cambodia to live, and they live well together. Two ethnics live well together, livelihoods, and they doesn't really care about the borders. And back to the history, we used to have a war. We used to have a border divide the north and the south of countries. But when it's come to a peak, to have a higher peak, that's the normal people feel like the social life is, they need to connect to each other, so they don't care about the ideologicals anymore, and they're forcing to choose one side. And after they choose one side, it will come to the result that the borders and the walls are got down. So everything's connected together. So it's really related to, I think it's related to the goals of visual politics. To me, visual politics and kind of visual is to bring the idea to common people. So I really like your ideas is the film doesn't have any conclusions at all. I think this would be the best if the film doesn't have any conclusion at all, because it leaves the space for common people to have these ideas about how society can be. But I think if we want to give them a space, we need to give them enough evidence, enough information, so they can choose which side they can become. So it's related. I will ask you. I'm really curious about how you can choose what actors who's gonna say it in the video that represented enough for every aspect of the ideological. So the common audience who doesn't have any political backgrounds, information, after see the film, they can choose which side. Yeah. I hope you can catch my question.
Yeah. What was the last one? You're curious about
Yeah. So
what actors I put in the
yes.
film, or what actors watching the film, or?
Yes, like when you're making the films,
Right.
how you decide how many actors, how many interviewees, and how many sides the film should have, so people can get all kind of information and decide themselves.
Okay. The way I make films is, well, this film is part of a larger project, which I keep changing the name of. Right now it's called Digging to China, because that's what I did when I was 7 years old, is I dug a hole in my backyard because someone told me if I dug deep enough I would go to China, because I've seen China on a globe. So blame my parents for misleading me. And what I've done, as I mentioned, I have 100, 120 interviews with people about various things. One of my top questions in the past 4 years has been, tell me about your trip to the Great Wall, or tell me what you think about the Great Wall. And so I have about 50 people of my own interviews, as well as all of the archive footage that I sourced from various places. So earlier versions of the film had many more of my sort of ethnographic interviews, or my own interviews. And I thought it was lovely and darling. Of course, these are my friends, so I like to see them on film, and they're doing fun things. But as it went on, my colleague Andy and other people said there are too many, it's confusing, why is so-and-so there? It's repetitive. I like repetitiveness, but it didn't work for other people. So as it happens, and it happens almost all the time, is, you know, you start off with 10 times as many, 10 times as long as it should be, and then you just whittle it down. But making a film is not about sort of adding things, it's about subtracting things. Subtracting down to get to, and this is where it's quite different from writing an essay. So in an essay you can have footnotes, and you can have asides, you can have all sorts of things. You can make I've been taught to make multi-layered arguments, and that shows sort of strength. Whereas in my kind of filmmaking, it's more about concentrating everything down to one or two, and at most 3 messages, because you really can't get more than that. Because it's already operating at 2 or 3 levels in terms of verbal sound, nonverbal sound, and then various kind of levels of video, of images. So I started off with many more interviews, and I just cut them down. And I thought I need some more Chinese faces in there. At first it was all Western faces, mostly Western faces, and a Korean friend of mine. A lot of Thai people, but you can always have more Thais in it. But I decided actually towards the end to put in the 2 kind of lead Han Chinese characters, Andy and Heidi. Heidi Wang, because I wanted to show sort of a mainstream Chinese view. Both of them went to primary and secondary school in mainland China, and I wanted to say not what you think about it, what were you taught, how does it work in the textbook. So just, I guess I'm rambling, but it shows how editing the film was sort of a rambling process. I would take people out, and then I'd put them back in, or I'd shorten them and lengthen them. And the problem with editing a film is that you're never done. That's why you need to have a deadline, because you just keep editing the film forever. And at a certain point, you need to stop and see what other people say. Sorry.
I think this is it, right? Yeah. Would you like to say something? Ajahn Narumon. Sorry, I keep calling her nickname. Sure.
Okay, I think we now go to an end. I've been to 3 walls, the Berlin Wall. Before it's teared up. And the second, our others already shared. Second is going to Moodjalin, the Korean. And third, just come back, you can see from my Facebook with the Great Wall. But I don't see the feeling of the wall at the Great Wall. I just feel maybe the ceiling of sublime. I think basically people go there and doesn't see it's a wall between the Han and the non-Han. They're just saying that this is part of the great China. And I think when Carl talking about the Silk Road, I think you might see the feeling with the what you call great river, great China. But I think this is when things saying that it might fit with the new so-called China when they rebrand the Great Wall with the different feeling. But I think your film try to put the argument in a different way, which is I think it's quite interesting. However, I follow with he realized saying that I would like you to in the future with another war, but the U.S. war. Since you are able to do that, we also would like to see, because I think the U.S. war is still fit the idea that between inside and outside, and the feeling of what you call superior with the Trump, and idea feeling that the Mexican or the Latin American is going to, attack. But I think maybe you might end up saying that China changed, but the U.S. go back to the something like 2,000 years ago when they start building the wall. I don't know. But anyway, what I see today is that I'm really feeling great that, 2 years ago, it's very 10 minutes, right? Or 7 minutes with a very short clip with the film and with the long article that will start writing and talk. And at that time, we have a lot of discussion. With the feeling that, okay, changing from text-based to be with the visual. And this time, you do the real visual, not with the text. And I think this is a very great thing for the future, that when we study social science, and I think this is a very great thing that we are able to do that. So for me, on behalf of the MAIDS program, International Development Study, I think it's very great for us that we get the people like you who are coming once a year or every 2 years and give us a talk, and we hope that in the future we will be able to receive and get something more to you as well. So maybe for me, on behalf of the team, I would like to ask us to give a big applause to Bill. And also give a big applause to our discussant, who also, when I asked, everybody saying that, okay, we will on it, and I think we will have a new project together. So thank you, Ajahn Preeda. Ajahn Moodjalin, thank you. And Ajahn Soravis, thank you very much. Ajahn Nick already saying that he watched your film before, so it's fun. So he just say, okay, and we fix the days. And also thank you, Ajahn Pandit, who also become our. And I also have to thank Kun Ankana from the ASEAN Research Center for Migration, who also come to see the film and become the, ad hoc MC for us. So thank you very much. And so now I would like to close the session and would like to give a big applause for us who stay in the call room and stay until the end. Thank you very much. Shall we have the picture together? Even though the Facebook Live is, the voice is very little, so far we don't have that.